President Buhari tasked Nigerians in the Republic of Korea to project the country's positive image.
Nigerian in diaspora in many countries of the world achieve tremendous successes through hard work, resilience, and resourcefulness.
Nigerian Air Force begins investigation into accidental airstrikes on civilians.
Federal government refused 22 pieces of repatriated Benin bronzes from the United States.
We must say thank you to the United States of America for recognizing the need for them to open a new chapter in this direction. Good morning, Nigeria. Today we shall focus on currency management.
It's no more news now that the Central Bank of Nigeria has resolved to redesign, produce and circulate new series of banknotes of 200 naira, 500 naira and 1,000 naira.
Beginning from the 15th of December 2022, the new naira notes will be in circulation. Now, according to the governor of the central bank, Mr. Godwin Emefiele, he said that the holding of banknotes by members of the public with data indicating that well over 80% of currency in circulation is outside the vaults of commercial banks is certainly one of the reasons why the Apex Bank is redesigning denominations of the naira.
Now, Emefiele also cited worsening shortage of clean and fit banknotes and risk of counterfeiting evidenced by several security reports as other reasons for redesigning the naira. The CBN, however, says the new and existing currencies shall remain legal tender and circulate together until January 31, 2023, when the existing currencies shall cease to be legal tender.
Well, you may, of course, know that currency management is a key function of the Central Bank of Nigeria, as enshrined in Section 2B of the CBN Act of 2007. It's also been said that one of the hallmarks of an effective central bank is the integrity of the local legal tender. Now, others, of course, include the efficiency of its supply, as well as the efficacy and the conduct of monetary policy as a function of an apex bank.
Now, one may then ask, why is the CBN redesigning the naira at this time, a year after the introduction of the e-naira? The Central Bank Governor, Godwin Emefiele, in a special briefing, raised concerns that the Apex Bank is facing with the management of the current series of banknotes and currency in circulation, particularly those outside the banking system in Nigeria.
Emefiele also said that in recent times, currency management has faced several challenges that have continued to grow in scale and sophistication, with attendant consequences for the integrity of both the CBN and the country at large.
Now you want to ask, so what are the issues around redesigning the naira and currency management? We shall find out from our panel of guests on Good Morning Nigeria today. I'm Ian Ray John. Thank you for joining us.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I join my colleague Ian Ray to also welcome you to the program Good Morning Nigeria. As we focus on currency management, we are of course live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. In the course of the program, we'll have our complimentary segments, and these include newspaper review and business. For now, let's take the highlights of the morning news with our colleague who is already seated, Anne Jibuno. Good morning, Anne.
Good morning, Kingsley, and Henry, good morning. And good morning, Nigeria. Here's the news. President Muhammadu Buhari is back in Abuja after a 5-day official visit to the Republic of Korea. The president arrived at Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport about 6 o'clock this morning. He was received by his Chief of Staff, Professor Ibrahim Gambari, FCT Minister Mohammed Musa Bello, Inspector General of Police Usman Alkali Baba, Director General, Department of State Service, Yusuf Magaji Bichi, and other senior government officials. While in the Republic of Korea, President Buhari attended the first World Bio Summit aimed at boosting global cooperation in the development of vaccines in preparation for future pandemics. Reflecting on lessons learned from COVID-19, he also met separately with both the Korean leader, Speaker of the National Assembly, and captains of strategic industrial concerns. Consequently, a multi-million-dollar quick-fix project agreement was signed for the rehabilitation of Kaduna Refinery between the NNPC and South Korea's Daewoo Engineering and Construction Company. Special advisor to the President on Media and Publicity, Femi Adesina, described the visit as highly successful. And before leaving the Republic of South Korea, Nigerians in that area were tasked to replicate the excellent virtues of their country and project a positive image through their actions, character, conduct, and general comportment. President Buhari threw the challenge at an audience with the leadership of the Nigerian community in the Asian country.
And therefore, in many countries of the world have achieved tremendous successes through hard work, resilience, and resourcefulness. No doubt in my mind that similar success stories will continue to be replicated amongst the Nigerian diaspora community in the Republic of South Korea.
And back home, the federal government is securing investment for the Lagos-Calabar Coastal Rail Line. Minister of Transportation, Wazu Jaji Sambo, says the project is critical to the Buhari administration, hence government's desire to deliver the rail line in no distant time.
The ministry has identified a company, an investor, that is willing to fund the project, and we are in talks with that company on the basis of sharing the scope of work between them and the company that has the contract, which is CCECC.
The Federal Ministry of Agriculture has received the report on the 2022 wet season agricultural performance compiled by Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria. The report indicates that food production decreased this year as a result of flood, pests, and diseases.
There were good hopes of bumper harvest, because even though there is some fluctuation at the takeoff of the rainy season, by the time I come back, particularly this month, October, all the hope of harvest and whatever I had was turned down.
The Nigerian Air Force says it has constituted a committee of officers to compile all allegations of accidental air strikes on civilians, as well as review the circumstances leading to such strikes. This was made known by the Chief of the Air Staff, Air Marshal Oladayo Amao, at the opening ceremony of the 2022 Air Operations Seminar holding in Uyo, Akwa Ibom State, from the 27th to 28th October 2022, with a view to proffering far-reaching measures aimed at mitigating future occurrence of collateral damage on civilians during Nigerian Air Force operations. The Air Chief also noted that the investigation would further promote accountability and allow the NAF to learn valuable lessons in order to avoid similar cases in the future, as well as take extra measures to minimize civilian harm and casualties in conflict areas. Now, 22 pieces of repatriated Benin bronzes were received by the Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, Zubairu Dada, in Abuja, on behalf of the federal government. Zubairu Dada says the United States has responded positively to Nigeria's previous calls to repatriate Nigerian artifacts taken during the colonial era. And the Federation Account Allocation Committee, FAC, has shared a total sum of 760.235 billion naira in September 2022 Federation account revenue to the federal government, states and local government councils. This was contained in a communique issued at the end of the Federation Account Allocation Committee FAC meeting October 2022. The distributable revenue comprised distributable statutory revenue of 502.135 billion naira, distributable value-added tax VAT revenue of 189.928 billion naira, electronic money transfer levy revenue of 8.172 billion naira, and augmentation of 60 billion naira. A statement by Henshaw Ogubike, Director Information Press and Public Relations in the Office of the Accountant General, indicated the balance in the excess crude account was $472,513.64. According to the communique, in the month of September 2022, oil and gas royalties increased tremendously, while petroleum profit tax and excise duty recorded marginal increases. Value-added tax, VAT, import duty, and companies' income tax decreased considerably. Well, that's the news for now. The program continues with Kingsley and Henry after this break.
If you just joined us, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. The National Bureau of Statistics, NBS, says cost of cooking gas increased by 61% in 12 months. Let's get the details from Alika Okpanachi Arwa.
The price of 12.5 kg of cooking gas increased by 61% to 9,906 naira in September 2022 from 6,165 naira in September 2021. So says the National Bureau of Statistics in its report on liquefied petroleum gas price watch for September 2022. In its state profile analysis, the Bureau stated that Cross River recorded the highest average retail price for refilling 12.5 kg cylinder of the product with 10,937 naira, followed by Kogi with 10,760 naira and Oyo with 10,724 naira. The lowest average price was recorded in Yobe with 8,350 naira, followed by Katsina and Taraba with 8,545 naira and 9,026 naira respectively. Analysis by geopolitical zone showed that the Southwest recorded the highest average retail price for refilling a 12.5 kg cylinder with 10,320 naira, followed by Southwest with 10,202 naira, while the Northeast recorded the lowest price with 9,300. Speaking to some residents of the Federal Capital Territory, they expressed worry over the rising cost of the products.
Like me now is 6 kg, and the last time I feed it, I think should be 5,500 or 6,000, the case may be.
I buy gas 10,500. That is, because if I want to buy gas, I don't buy half. I make normally formerly when I fill the gas, I fill it 6,000. Now I'm buying it at the rate of 10,500. We squeeze ourselves at times just to buy the gas, and it's not comfortable with us. We don't know. We are praying that something good should be done in future time because it's not easy.
As of last week, it was 950 naira, and at least many cannot afford it. Even me, sometimes we go using coal, that is charcoal.
I don't know what is causing the high of the gas. 7 cylinder, almost 8,000 naira to refill it. So please, I'm appealing to government to look at that aspect if there is anything that they can do.
With Business News, Alika Okpanachi Arwa.
Thank you very much, Alika, for the business package and Good Morning Nigeria. Newspaper review is next for us on the program. right, we have two newspapers with us this morning. We have a Nation newspaper as well as Vanguard. Let me begin by taking a look at the window page of the Nation newspaper. Above the name flag, we'll take some of the headlines. NNPCL and Daewoo Company sign MOU on Kaduna Refinery. Flood claims will be over 1 trillion naira, say insurers. And names of NDDC board members before Senate, that's on page 4. And no room for vote bias during election, says EFCC, along to complete projects, details on page 27. And then the lead story is with a kicker. It says terror alert. Parties in a fix over call to halt campaigns. You have a number of riders to that headline. UK cautions citizens against traveling to Abuja. Akiyemi, that's Professor Bolaji Akiyemi, former Minister of External Affairs. NSA should warn politicians. Now, we won't stop our rally, says LP, that's Labour Party. APC, PDP, we are studying situation. Sanwo-Olu proposes 1.69 trillion naira budget of continuity and $1.5 billion Lekki deep sea port ready for test run. Why are you run into trouble by Autumn and Emir of Kano seeks ISDP's help on education? Details of that on page 27. Erin?
Okay, now let's take a look at the Vanguard, and just like the Nation, the banner, it's actually screaming right here on the Vanguard, and it says, UK insists on terror alert as major mall shuts operation. And the riders, we have FCDA reclaims Buhari laws cool land. FCDA advises British nationals against traveling to FCT and 13 states. Alleged raid of Trademore estate by DSS, American soldier false. We also have FCT police saying Abuja is safe. FCT minister declares. I expect Buhari to stop million-man matches, and that's credited to Professor Akinyemi. We also have among the rider insists Nigeria lacks capability to pick intelligent reports like US. After Nigeria, US issues alert on terror attack in South Korea. Of course, this story is the main lead on so many dailies this morning. Above the main flag of the Vanguard this morning, we have how police DPP's negligence kept 23-year-old mechanic in prison for 9 years. And the victim says, I suffered for nothing. NDDC, Aqua must account for 300 billion naira contracts awarded without due process. And that is credited to Manab. Details on page 9 of the Vanguard. Beside that story, we have insecurity. Commuters growing as criminals take over Otukwu Alaide Makodi Road. Details on page 20. And just below those headlines, we have pension funds investment in corporate securities rise to 43.9%. And that is measured at 1.4 trillion naira. Just looking below the Vanguard newspaper this morning, that's below the picture story, we have another bold headline which says, while federal government is keeping Nnamdi Kanu despite court ruling. And that is credited to Malami. Below that headline, we have flood hinders petrol distribution in Abuja as vessels discharge in Lagos. Also in the Vanguard this morning, details on page 12, we have trapped foreign airlines funds rise 51% to $700 million. And yes, Warri Refinery will deliver fuel first quarter of 2023. That is credited to the federal government. Details of these stories you can find in the Vanguard newspaper today.
Yeah. But I don't think that there's much to actually discuss in the various headlines, except to just drop one or two comments with regard to the responses to the terror alert. There are concerns already been expressed by some citizens and proposals for a stoppage of political campaigns ahead of the 2023 elections. But what would that solve if political campaigns were to be halted at this time? The threats were for the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. Now, is the entire country under threat of terrorist attacks? So why then would political parties stop their campaigns? Major gatherings are also being targeted by the terrorists in their activities or in their operations. I think that it's a bit panicky to say that campaigns should be halted. There are forms of campaigns, by the way. It is not just mass rallies and million-man marches or 1,000-person marches that you have all over the place. And there have been no reports in recent times of any of the marches being hijacked or being attacked by terrorists. I think that it's again the less that is said about these things, the better it is, so that even the terrorists themselves don't begin to get fresh ideas. So are we going to say, for instance, as if terror attacks do increase, assuming they do increase, that we won't conduct the elections next year? I mean, so it's honestly, some scaremongering, I think, is unnecessary. And those are people are living in Abuja. They are still, we are in the studios here in Abuja.
Places of worship are still holding, and so many other gatherings still taking place. Well, I also think that maybe the security operatives should be a bit ahead. In taking charge of this situation. I mean, before the alert was raised, they could have handled it so that we don't get to this point where people begin to, panic and begin to think that, well, it's really very unsafe. Because I hear that some schools are also beginning to shut down because of this threat, which may not be so good.
Let me take it from the schools closing. Some of the schools, if not most of them, are on midterm break. So this has coincided with their midterm break, and it's nothing to do with the threat of terror attacks in the Federal Capital Territory, for instance. I also said earlier in the week during our newspaper review segment that the United States government, as well as the British government, raised the alarm over threats of terrorist attacks in the Federal Capital Territory. Did they share the intelligence with their Nigerian counterparts? Because what normally happens in the global north, that's to say in the advanced countries or OECD countries, if there are terror plots, those countries will normally share intelligence, including the United States. You will share intelligence with advanced countries. Did you share the same intelligence with us rather than first going out to the media to say, oh, you are warning your citizens, threats of terror are all over the place. You are asking your citizens who are performing non-essential functions to immediately leave the country. But of course, this couldn't have happened overnight. So I don't know whether they shared the intelligence.
Whether they shared intelligence or not. I think our own security operatives are supposed to be, on top of their game in, ensuring that the country is safe. There's such a lot. They should also be in the know.
There is nothing to suggest. There is nothing to suggest that our security agencies have been beaten hands down. And there is nothing to suggest that they are not on top of the situation. It is not as if there has been a security breach. This is a threat. And you say that it is credible. So if it is credible, of course, we are not, the foreign powers that are indicating that there are security threats are not coming to enforce security for us in Nigeria. It will be the business of our security agencies. That's why I'm saying that unless they pass on the intelligence earlier on, and then they seem to have seen no positive response, which will not be the case. I recall on Good Morning Nigeria some weeks ago, we had a conversation around the subject matter of the reduced security threats as well as incidents of terror attacks and sundry insecurity across the country. I mean, if you recall, virtually on a daily basis there were reports of kidnapping, banditry, terror attacks, persons being killed, and so on and so forth. We haven't had that lately, and it's not as if the security agencies are letting their guards down. I think that's the most important thing. The fact that you and I are able to come to work and offices and businesses continue to remain open means the Jabi Lake Mall that is shut has done so advisedly. And it says, look, we are having to review the security threats and then see how things go. Other malls are still open.
I agree, but I just hope that the situation is actually brought under control, and we can actually move around and not feel threatened about the security issue. Talking about the school, which you said coincided with the midterm break. How we they are going to resume when it's time to resume? Remember what happened last term before they closed.
When the time comes for them to resume, we will learn whether they will resume
or not. Okay, talking about resumption, I think we should talk about, the refinery, and the agreement that was reached in South Korea by the president with Daewoo. We just hope that, the refineries will begin to work. We shouldn't just be agreements reached and all of that, and we don't get to see the refineries working and delivering what it should to Nigerians.
What has been signed is according to the story, it's an MOU.
MOU, yes.
So perhaps they will also then take additional steps to get a formal contract to be signed, and then we move on. Already Port Harcourt and Warri refineries are being worked on the basis of various contracts that were signed. And it is one thing that we get these refineries working, and then another thing to sustain their operations. And part of the reason why I chuckled is at least 10 years ago, Kaduna Refinery was fixed by Nigerian engineers who are employees of NNPC. The managing director of Kaduna Refinery at that time was engineer Bola Ayodele. He was the managing director of Kaduna Refinery, and Kaduna Refinery was working. I recall also on Good Morning Nigeria, there's an engineer from Kaduna Polytechnic. He was our guest on the program. We were having the conversation around the role of engineers or otherwise, and he did confirm that yes, the engineers at Kaduna Refinery contacted local engineers, and then also got some of the spares from the workshops at Ajaokuta Steel Company, and that the local chapter of the Society of Engineers in Kaduna gave an award to the then managing director of Kaduna Refinery. That's engineer Bola Ayodele. And yesterday again on Good Morning Nigeria, when we were having a conversation around the state of fuel depots around the country, engineer Emeka Eme, who is also another great petroleum engineer, did say, look, the human resource that we have in these refineries, we must be sure that we are able to tap into them, utilize them for purposes, because these are some of the finest brains you can find around the world. So part of it, therefore, would be to see, look, how do we energize our local competencies in getting these things done? The refinery was fixed, as I said, about 10 years ago, and then what happened after that?
So, good question. And then looking at the fact that we're going to be spending $1.5 billion on this, I think that we should begin to look inwards, looking at the state of the economy of the country. Okay, so that's it on the news paper review on Good Morning Nigeria today. So let's take a break. When we come back, we shall get into the conversation proper. As a prompt for our conversation segment, which is on currency management, let's take this background report by our correspondent, Ikene Ndulwe.
Wednesday, 26th October started like every other day, and no one was expecting the news from the Central Bank of Nigeria that broke the internet and every other news platform. The CBN Governor, Godwin Emefiele, announced that the Apex Bank would redesign the country's currency to take control of the currency in circulation. The exercise will affect the highest denominations, which is 200, 500 and 1,000 naira notes. Mr. Emefiele said the new notes will be released for public use from Thursday, December 15, 2022, while the old notes would cease to be legal tender from January 31, 2023. Statistics show that 80% of currency in circulation is outside the vaults of commercial banks, and this has led to challenges with unintended consequences for the country. These challenges, according to the Apex Bank, include worsening shortage of clean and fit banknotes, increasing ease and risk of counterfeiting and other security issues.
Also, in view of the prevailing level of security situation in the country, the CBN is convinced that the incidence of terrorism and kidnapping will be minimized, as access to large volume of money outside the banking system used
as sort of funds for ransom payments will begin to dry up.
Despite explanations from the central bank, some Nigerians have expressed worry over the closeness of the policy deadline to the 2023 general elections, while others believe the timeline for the implementation is too short and will cause difficulties for bank customers. Incidentally, this announcement is coming 1 year after the e-Naira was launched, and many say they are yet to understand the policy. On this episode of Good Morning Nigeria, experts shall be speaking on plans to redesign the Naira as well as other currency management issues.
And to discuss the topic, currency management, first let me introduce in our studio here Professor Uche Uwaleke, Professor of Capital Market at the Nasarawa State University, Kefi, and President Capital Market Academics in Nigeria. Glad to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thanks so much, Mary. Thank you, Kingsley. Good morning, Nigeria.
We also have right here in the studio an economic analyst, Yushau Aliyu. Glad to have you join us.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you.
And joining us from our Benin Network Center is Professor Mike Obadan, Professor of Economics and member CBN Monetary Policy Committee. Thank you for joining us.
All right. It looks like there's some delay in the audio connection to Benin. If Professor Mike Obadan's audio is fine, Professor Mike Obadan, of course, along with the other two guests here with us in the studios, they are regulars on Good Morning Nigeria whenever we are discussing economic and financial matters. And I would like to begin this conversation with Professor Mike Obadan, considering the fact that he's also a member of the Central Bank Monetary Policy Committee. Professor Mike Obadan, tell us some more about the rationale for redesigning the Naira at this time beyond what the central bank governor gave on Wednesday. I mean, is this likely to be any game changer in the health of our national currency?
Thank you very much, Kingsley. Well, let me say, first of all, that the currency redesign is rather overdue, considering international best practices. The country last engaged in this kind of exercise about 20 years ago, and international best practice, indicates that central banks, should redesign, their legal tenders every 5 to 8 years. And you will agree with me that since the last exercise in Nigeria, so many things have happened to the extent of trying to or tending to undermine the integrity of the Naira, the local legal tender. And in recent times, inflation has escalated. The capacity of monetary policy to achieve its primary goal of monetary and price stability has tended to be undermined. And you also observe that currency, counterfeiting has also, been on the rise. Counterfeiting of, the large notes in particular, that is to say 500 naira notes and then 1000 naira notes. And these have been facilitated with developments in technology. And the legal tender due to numerous other factors, have tended, to lose integrity. And so the bank considered that there is need to improve the integrity of the local legal tender, and also very importantly, in relation to its mandate, the very compelling need to improve the transmission mechanism, of monetary policy actions and decisions to the real economy, which has tended to be undermined by the huge quantity of banknotes that have been outside the system. What happens is that the central bank uses various monetary policy instruments, interest rates, money supply changes, to strive to attain the primary goal of price stability, monetary stability. But when very huge quantities of money, is outside the banking system, the ability of the bank to do that, is seriously undermined. And then the issue of counterfeiting, which I mentioned, and a few other reasons. So the reasons are compelling. It's not just that the central bank wants to, change bank notes, to inflict pain and hardship on Nigerians. The measures being taken are targeted at helping to achieve its mandate. Inflationary expectations, is one of them. Inflationary pressures, and quite a number of other reasons that compelled the bank to say, let's embark on this. In other words, the need to improve the monetary transmission mechanism, the need to minimize counterfeiting of currencies, and achieve other goals, like for instance the cashless economy, which the bank has talked about and implemented for quite some time. And to the extent that the huge volumes of cash are outside the banking system, then it means financial inclusion is in one way or the other also undermined. And once there is inclusion, the ability to achieve the primary mandate also improves. So invariably, the bank had cogent reasons, considered the situation critically before embarking on this policy measure. Yes, there may be initial implementation challenges, but I think once implementation begins, whatever challenges that may be observed invariably will be addressed appropriately, so that the overall goal can be achieved.
Thank you so much, Professor Obadan. You have given some reasons, counterfeiting, too much cash in circulation and others. I'll get back to all those points, but I want to ask Professor Owaleke, at a time when government is grappling with high fiscal deficit, debt crisis, severe revenue crisis, and of course looking at the recent Modi's downgrade of the Naira and underfunding of many government projects and programs, do you really think that this is the right time, for this redesign?
Well, I think it's an idea whose time has come, and I also think it's a welcome development, and for me, it's one development that lends credence to the argument in support of the central bank independence, because the central bank is able to implement this sort of measure because it has independence. If the central bank were not independent, assume for example that you have a board of the central bank chaired by someone other than the central bank governor. one implication of this is that this measure may not see the light of the day if the board members or if the chairman, who is most likely to be a politician, is not favorably disposed towards it. Now, to answer your question, yes, I think the time is right. You can also add, at a time when even the central bank balance sheet is overstretched. Anytime the central bank is issuing a currency, you have central bank is creating liabilities. So on the liability side of the central bank, you have increasing liability, not supported by the assets. Okay, ordinarily you should also expect that the claims of the central bank on the government, of course, should constitute assets. But where you have most of these claims, the loans the central bank have given the government, not realizable, because of course we hear the government's plans to securitize them over a 40-year period. Then you could say the central bank balance sheet is stretched. So why introduce it at this time? Obviously there will be cuts. The cuts of even printing the new currency we have an issue. But of course, on balance, policies like this will always throw up winners and losers. But what's important is that at the end of the day, is it beneficial? Is it going to have a medium to long term positive impact on the economy? And I think if you take it on balance, you're looking at the costs and the benefits on balance, it is one measure that will be positive for the Nigerian economy. The reasons have been well initiated by the governor and also by Prof. But I also need to add that one of the reasons why central banks redesign currencies, choose to redesign currencies, okay, at the extreme case, demonetize. Demonetize means to take out currencies, is to remove black money, from an economy. So when the central bank has evidence that there is black money in the economy, money used to finance crime, okay, for example, today we are faced with the challenge of kidnapping, and kidnappers or people who are involved in this have access to the huge funds circulating outside the bank vaults. Okay, so the central bank, in that kind of situation, may want to say, okay, let us redesign to be able to take out black money, from the economy. So I think one of the purposes of doing this is to really address that issue. Okay, by redesigning our currency, it is very likely that these ransom payments will reduce. It's also very likely that the cash used in corruption, that fuels corruption in the economy, access to cash will greatly reduce.
All right, Professor Waleke, thank you very much. Yusha Leo, let's have your take on this. Is this cosmetic or substantive in terms of its intent and the likely success once implementation begins fully?
It is highly substantive based on the fact that it is fundamental exigency for the economy today. And most of us who have been a sort of critic to central bank using the CRR and at the same time using the NPR, and we challenge the central bank that the central bank must tell us the liquidity in the economy in the first instance in controlling money supply. And today we have gotten it correctly that the central bank has attested that over 80% of liquidity is not within banking sector. So if above 80% is out of banking sector and you are regulating the economy with the raising of NPR and CRR, then definitely you are not working with the right tools. And that is why today, when the issue of redesigning the currency is now mentioned, I am happy for the central bank, because it's one of the wonderful decisions to be taken, not even now. In fact, since when the digital economy was mentioned, or when you are making an assertion on what a digital economy is all about, it's just trying to show you that it is an economy guided with technology, guided with digital currencies, guided with digital transaction. And not only that, when you now look at the scenario the central bank is coming to address, is addressing many issues. we have highlighted on 19th of this month in a program similar to this of many of our liquidity. One, with a bandit. Second, we had a situation where Boko Haram attacked a complete bank and took cash away, not only the domestic currency. We have that scenarios in large scale. Not only that one, we have dilapidated currencies being managed, especially in communities that are displaced. So many of our liquidity is trapped in trouble zones. So now that the central bank has taken into the right direction and using the right, what we are hoping is that we are hoping to have a more better quality currency. You know, when you check the structure of the currencies, that is, you now take the lower denomination with the polymer and you take the paper currencies with the higher denominations. So if you look at the currency users and you now look at the implication or the advantages or the advantages of these currencies in an economy, the CBN has to educate Nigerians that this paper money, even if you work or you deliver service and you earn it, it's not your own. It's owned by the central bank. It's a legal tender. What you only have the value attached to the currency. Even though when you now take, for instance, like I gave an example, you go to a market that is not digital and you're now faced with a problem of purchasing an item that 3 costs 10 naira and each will be categorized at 3 naira 0.33. So that 33 is not responding to economy, it's also adding to inflation. So in all ramification, what the CBN is doing today, I'm happy for the central bank, and also I want to disabuse people's mind. It's not politically motivated, it is economically motivated. And like Professor Biden says, the CBN is compelled. In my own opinion, it's a cogent decision CBN must take, because ordinarily all economies are managing their currencies and CBN is managing our currency, both the production, the supply and the cost of production. One important aspect I want to add also, based on what Professor Ochewaleke mentioned, the cost implication, is the fact that it's not only the cost of printing, there is also cost of mutilation, which is also very, very significant in currency management. And there is also the need, not only when these currencies are coming, you look at the structure of the users, and you now also emphasize, probably if we succeeded in getting these new redesigned currencies from 100 naira to 1000, then in the second phase we are expecting the polymer currencies to be attained to, because they are in a more devastating situation.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Lee. You have made so many points talking about, affecting the quality of the naira. But I'd like to ask Professor Obada, how does redesigning the naira actually affect the value of the naira? And, some experts have said that, there are actually more issues, demanding the attention of the CBN at this time, particularly looking around the foreign exchange, the foreign exchange market, the depreciating currency, soaring inflation. Nigeria's inflation increased for the 8th straight month to 20.77% in September 2022, and that's from 22.52% the previous month. Looking at all these other issues, could you also tell us, is there a monetary policy significance of redesigning the naira?
Thank you very much, Yeri. I will say categorically yes. From my preliminary remarks, I emphasized the issue of effectiveness of monetary policy actions being undermined by the large quantity of banknotes outside the banking system. Such notes are not directly impacted by monetary policy actions. Central bank has two major approaches with respect to monetary policy actions. With the instruments at its disposal, it can either tighten monetary policy with a view to, reducing money supply growth, liquidity, and hence tame inflation. Or it can implement an easy or less restrictive monetary policy if it wants to put more liquidity in the economy. But the challenge of inflation, which you rightly mentioned, requires, tightening the monetary policy arsenal to be able to address the phenomenon of money supply growth, which tends to escalate inflation if it is much. And it is the funds, the money within the banking system that such monetary policy actions can easily impact. But then what is outside, the banking system tends to escape the implication or impact of monetary policy actions. And that's the reason why, we expect that the redesigning of the Naira notes would enable more money that is outside the system to come into the banking system, so that the regulatory, power and then of course the regulatory actions of the central bank can become more effective. So you imagine if, let's say, 90% of the money outside the banking system, through this redesigning of new notes exercise, come into the system, the central bank will have a much better handle to regulate the money supply and hence also control inflation. So the point being made that the action of the central bank, the new notes, have no relationship with the current inflation trend is not correct at all. So one of the aims is to also tame the inflationary pressures through making the CBN's monetary policy instruments to be much more effective. So there is a relationship with it. And of course, let me also say that central bank continues to implement some other measures, not necessarily the issue of raising rates and others, towards taming the inflation. The bank is concerned about the inflation accelerating, and some of the drivers, are within the country, whereas some are outside. In other words, both exogenous factors, for example, increases in energy prices, in the global market, increases in food prices in the global market, they all affect, the price level in Nigeria through globalization and the fact that the country depends heavily on imports, which means a large dose of imported inflation is important in the current inflation in Nigeria. And the exchange rate depreciation is also a major factor, because the country is not earning enough foreign exchange, either through export of goods and services or through foreign capital inflows. So invariably...
All right, Professor Michael Badan, we'd like to thank you in the meantime for the explanations that you have provided. Let's come back to our Abuja studios. We have another guest who's just joined us. Is Paul Alaje, an economic analyst. Paul, we're glad to have you on the program this morning.
Good morning, and thank you so much for having me.
All right, before we ask you to take your first question, I want to come back to Professor Uche Waleke while we are still on the subject matter of the rationale for redesigning the Naira notes. The central bank says, and that's been confirmed by the guests that we have here, that about 80%, if not more, of the currency, it's outside of the banking system. Now, explain that to the layman who is watching this program. Other than, say, a tiny percentage of counterfeiting, the currency notes that people have are first issued by the central bank, and individuals, you and I, do not walk directly to the central bank to go and pick up the money. We go to banks, the banks give us the money, and then you are now arguing that, 80% of it is outside of the formal banking system, it's in the informal sector. But you know what you are dealing with, and now you are trying to get monetary policy instruments to deal with just about 20%, and you have no control over the 80%. How does a layman understand that? The money in your pocket, the money in my pocket, you and I didn't print the money. You got the money from the bank. And so why is that now an issue for consideration, Prof?
Yes, it's an issue because if the central bank is trying to control inflation by reducing the quantity of money in circulation, the central bank won't be able to do that if it's circulating outside the banking sector. Now, let me say this. Currency in circulation, CIC, is made up of two components. One, the money in the vault of the banks. Two, the one that is circulating outside the banks. Now, the central bank says that in the last few years, since 2015, that this money circulating outside has almost doubled. That we now have currency in circulation to the tune of 3.3 trillion naira, including the one in the bank. But out of the 3.32 trillion, that's over 80%, about 2.7 is circulating outside. You mentioned it. It's circulating outside partly because of the huge informal sector we have, in the economy. So, and that CIC is one of the components of what the central bank calls the broad money. Broad money supply is currency in circulation plus demand deposits, that's your current account, plus savings, plus time, plus foreign currency deposits. That's broad money. So currency in circulation is one aspect. So the central bank wants to control money supply as a way of controlling inflation, and it has no handle, just as Prof explained, over the currency in circulation because the bulk of it is outside. Whatever the central bank is doing, because under the monetary policy framework, there are, the final target of monetary policy is inflation. We have three targets. The final target is inflation. The first target is called the one target is called the operating target. The operating target is a reserve, the reserves in the banks, which the central bank has control over. The other target, which is the intermediate target, broad money, is where this currency in circulation is. And if the central bank has no control over the intermediate target, which is broad money, then it has difficulty controlling inflation using the monetary policy tools. So even if the central bank is saying, okay, I want to reduce money supply by increasing the MPR, it doesn't work. Between May and September, the MPR, monetary policy rate, has moved from 11.5 to 15.5. And yet, inflation rate has also shot up. Today, just as she mentioned, 20.77. So that tells you that in spite of the effort of the central bank to tighten monetary policy, inflation rate has been rising. Okay, yes, we know that there are supply side issues, structural issues that, in my view, are in the domain of the fiscal authorities. But the central bank also believes, there's evidence to say that there is also the monetary component which the central bank, is out to achieve. One other thing I want to mention, which hasn't been said here, one of the reasons for this, I think it will also enhance financial inclusion. Okay, in what way? by the time the central bank succeeds in getting these funds into the banking system, particularly as the central bank has said, even those in rural areas, if you must change your money, you have to do so through opening a bank account. So that way you now find that financial inclusion, which of course is defined as access to financial services, will be enhanced. The case of India is very instructive. A while ago I talked about the winners and losers. This measure, of course, has pros and cons. In the case of India, when India did a similar exercise in 2016, it lasted from 8th November to 31st December. Immediately, India announced that and started implementing. Of course, India experienced, short-term dislocations in the economy by way of course, there was chaos, long queues in the banks and ATM. Okay, so that should be expected. That from December 15th, we should also expect long queues. There was also even a drop in the country's GDP. GDP fell from 8% to about 7.1%. Job losses were also reported because small enterprises that were also cash based became affected, and so job losses. But these were temporary. Okay, because after 1 year, if you also checked the record, GDP also grew to 10% or so. So the point I'm making is this: we are bound to also have these initial challenges. I won't be surprised if the parallel markets, parallel market comes under severe pressure as a result of this policy, because those with cash, okay, who may not want to take them to the banks, may want to take advantage and say, let them go and exchange. So in the parallel market, you may see also exchange rate, going up. But as I said, I expect that to be short-lived. So I also expect to see, as I said, even in terms of growth may slow, temporary. But overall, by the end of January, January, I want to believe that these things will normalize. One thing I need to point out here, which is my personal opinion, the start date, in my view, should have been January 1st or January 2nd, just first week in January, and not December 15th. If you check the history of currency redesign, look at that of the European Central Bank. It took place on January 1st of 2002, and the timing is also very important. Why I say December 15th may not be ideal is because of the flurry of activities that take place during the festive period, and we also know that velocity of money, what we call velocity of money, in December is usually very high. Velocity of money is the rate at which money changes hands. So despite the digital nature of the economy, despite the cashless thing, in December, the preference for cash, okay, demand for cash is usually very high. Okay, when you attend weddings, you don't transfer money. You want to, spray or.
And that is the time people are supposed not to be going to the bank and the queuing.
Exactly.
Let's have your take on this.
Yes. What Professor is saying is quite fantastic, looking at the fact that in any policy decision, you look at the timing. And when you are looking at the timing, you look also at other leverages outside the policy. I have the same opinion in respect to timing of the practicability of the policy. That is, the 15th December is not hygienic, completely based on our culture and tradition. And CBN is also helping to develop our culture and tradition. And not only that, the challenges of those who are probably not in town. You find Nigerian businessmen traveling worldwide, and some will keep money in their homes. So that will not be so convenient for many Nigerians, and it will create so much of disturbances in their psychology. That is one angle. Second, I want the CBN must also look at the volume of cash coming from individuals, because if not in Nigeria, there is no need. No individual should keep more than 3-5 million, for instance, as a businessman in his business operations. But what is a public servant doing with 30 million at home? What is a military man doing with 50 million naira at home? There must be sanction.
The soccer way, not at home.
In the soccer way. So now, So now it's an advantage to government to raise more money. To finance a high deficit budget. So I think the proactive measures that must be done, this is the time the Economic and Financial Crime Commission should not be selective and should be diligent in the field. Besides that, the bureau de change, like rightly pointed by Professor, they will have a lot of shocks. But in my opinion, why must you be keeping millions of dollars in bureau de change? It's not hygienic at all. Even the way the dollars emanate, you keep only $5,000 at home. If it is above that, the law will cut off with you. So we're supposed to now be more proactive with our financial laws. The CBN has a very serious advantage of having an act that are independent, and at the same time they can operate and punish. So what we are expecting to see in this scenario, we want to see central bank punishing the stakeholders, that is the commercial banks, the bureau de change. We want them, and at the same time also we want them also to checkmate the excesses of those who are willingly taking out our reserve currency, our banknotes out of economic operations.
All right, thank you, Mr. Liu. You talked about disturbances and the psychology of Nigerians. I want to quickly also mention that, before this policy at the moment, we see that some banks do not even have the capacity to attend to customers. I'm sure you have noticed that there's still certain banks that customers are outside under the sun. They give them numbers. I mean, we've not started this policy where you have to deposit all you have just so that you can get the new notes. So will banks be able to meet up, and then would this not inflict more suffering on Nigerians? Because there's like you said, the time frame is short. By the end of January, that will be the end of the exercise. Now you would respond to that, Paul Alaje. Another question I want to ask is the issue of inflation. Professor Opadan said the redesign would affect the inflation rate, will probably bring it down. Let's not forget that with the flooding that we're currently experiencing, we're likely going to see a higher rise in inflation rate, and now we're redesigning. The question is, Nigerians are smart. Those who have monies in soccerways buried under the ground.
I was pointing at me.
Well, those who have money in soccerways and buried on the ground and all of that, they're smart. Now with this policy, they would find a way to exchange their money either into other areas. Real estate is going to really boom now, and then you're going to see equities and all of that. So will that not increase inflation? Paul Alaje, please respond.
Well, first of all, to talk about the capacity of banks, a research was carried out by organization in 2016 to see how many local governments are covered by banks. And I want for the five of us here to imagine our states. I'm not talking of the capital of the states or even local government headquarters. I'm saying those wards within our states. How many of them truly have commercial banks? How many of them have microfinance bank? The state where I came from, 10 local government out of 30 don't have any commercial bank presence. Any. And most of the local government have either one microfinance bank, at most 2 microfinance banks. The question is, even when you exchange the redesign naira, how will banks suddenly show up in this local government? Your central bank has made measure of introducing agency banking, where we have seen what we popularly known as POS. But in those POS stations, they also have their limitations. So it is important for us to make monetary policy effective by looking at how M1, which is currency in circulation, cash, and so on and so forth. But what brought us here in the first instance? Structural issues. Have we been able to solve the structural issues? The answer is no. So we can introduce these, but if we don't do the fundamental, you see, economic development is not a miracle. Economic development is worked to us. We can look for shortcuts. We can look for short gap measures to bring what we think will work. But how long will they last? So it is not when you start. It is how long will they last? And I want those that are viewing this program today or they will view in the future to think about local government within their state. How many commercial banks do you have there? We deal with network challenges. Even this is Abuja. You have instances where you don't have network all through. So there are structural issues that are beyond the control of monetary authority. And that's why fiscal authority, trade authority must become more responsible. So when we change Naira, another thing which I think is going to benefit Nigeria, and I mean Nigeria speaking macro now, is the cost of printing currency. It takes a lot. Imagine 20 years ago when those currencies were introduced, how much would be the cost of 200 Naira paper? And measure inflationary pressure, exchange rate pressure that has happened over 20 years on 200 Naira, on 500, on 1000 Naira. So the note you may be having, I don't have idea, but I doubt, because of quality of people we have in CBN, if the cost will be as much. If you check Dirham, that's the currency spent in the UAE, and you check the dollars, they are not as wide as our paper. So you may have a paper that is insufficiently large. It is not the paper that matters. It is what the paper can buy. So if central bank had come up with policy today to say, don't worry, Prof, your 1,000 Naira will now buy 10,000 Naira equivalent, nobody will argue.
True.
It is the value. What value? Because you see subsidy, 3 trillion Naira was budgeted for in 2023. Subsidy. But let's ask, are we really subsidizing or we are paying for exchange rate deficiencies? 2015, 2016, 2017, what was exchange rate to a dollar? What is exchange rate today? If we use the exchange rate of 2016, as we speak today, there is no subsidy. So what we are paying for in the real sense is exchange rate deficiencies. And central bank cannot print dollar, unfortunately. It now goes back to our capacity to export, trade authority, our capacity to put infrastructure in place, to tame inflation, fiscal authority. So central bank will make policy within the reality of what is available in our country. So if you ask me, if we change currency, one, I don't think December is a good time. A former president tried to remove subsidy sometimes around December. He lost elections. Yeah. Because you cannot deal with the sensitivity of people. You must study the culture of a people. Two, central banks also argue that people have very horrible culture in handling Naira. So when you print new currency, will the culture change overnight? The culture will remain the same. We need to provide orientation for our people on how to undo currency. You go to another environment, they hold their currency differently because guidance and thought were provided for them. You also ask questions about inflation. If this is going to guide inflation, if this is going to protect. The truth is that in the short term, you might be seeing some level of difference as a result of monetary policy. But in the medium term and long term, inflation does not exist in isolation. Economy stands on 3 legs: fiscal, monetary, and trade. So monetary is only 1/3. If there is still challenge, I tell you, and Nigerians should know, I don't know what a bag of rice will be by December. But I can tell you, you might be buying between 38 to 40, which is already holding in Wari as we speak. Which is already holding at 42 in Maiduguri as we speak. But will it be up to 45? Will it be up to 50? Because the largest farm for rice, I mean one of the largest, have been submerged by flood.
Yeah.
That's on one hand. On the other hand, the cost of energy.
You can also have new rice pyramids.
Where will it go from? From the sky?
I don't know. I'm just saying.
There is no new rice pyramid
grow from.
because we did not have flood.
Okay.
Now that we have flood, not in Kogi State, not only in Benue State, not only in Nasarawa State, not only in Bayelsa State, it extended to Jigawa State, it extended to many states. Unfortunately, most of these states are very significant to agriculture in our country. So where do we go from here?
Yeah, but more seriously now, there have been suggestions that dry season farming will have to be ramped up. But we had some shocks with flooding in the northwest a couple of years ago. Kebbi, for instance, Kebbi, which is a major rice producer, part of what they had to do was to ensure that they got inputs, they got seeds and seedlings for their dry season farming. That might be one option that has been suggested. I want to pause you, Paul Elijah, in the meantime. I'll return to Professor Mike Abada. Again, we take benefit of his membership of the NPCs. It doesn't speak for them, but of course the professor of economics. Prof, the issue of timing. I had cause to raise this shortly after the CBN came up with its policy here on Good Morning Nigeria. And I said, look, we are saying, well, effective the day after the CBN made the announcement, people were supposed to be going to the banks to deposit their money, but they will start collecting the new notes from December 15, and this is going to last until the 31st of January. Festive period, that's been raised. Elections ahead of us in February, and then the National Population Census also coming. And this is a time we expect people to also be queuing in the banks and getting money. Some of the banks, Elijah was talking about some local governments not having banks. Even in urban areas, a number of banks have closed some of their branches. The number of branches have shrunk in recent years. So why is this timing not being taken into consideration? And I'm sure, Prof, you remember this. The last major currency design we had in this country was in 1984. And the consequences were harsh. If you recall, cash was scarce to come by. I mean, those who deposited money needed to get theirs. I remember that very clearly, 1984. So why are we getting ourselves into this? And I also raised the example when we had a currency switch from pounds, shillings, and pence in 1973 to naira and kobo. The pound, shillings, and pence and naira and kobo ran side by side until end of June 1973. So, but now we say in December, when people are struggling to travel for Christmas, those whose houses have been submerged will be trying to see how they can clean up. That is when they are supposed to be going to bank, and hoarding will start. You won't have enough cash. This is a cash-based economy, still is. So why have we not taken all this time into consideration, as well as our history of currency switch that caused quite some distortions and discomfort to citizens? Prof.
Thank you very much, Kingsley. Let me admit that I share the concerns of stakeholders on the timing of the implementation of the new notes introduction. But let me also assure that the central bank invariably has learned some lessons from the previous exercises conducted over the years. And in particular, as Kingsley rightly said, there was much pain and sorrowing, in 1984, when, there was a change, of the legal tender. Invariably at that time, to prevent trafficking, currency trafficking across the country to other countries. I think that was a major concern. But I think that time preparation, was not adequate. If preparation were adequate, definitely the kind of suffering at that time would have been prevented. There was scarcity of the new notes, and people could not have money, to do their basic transactions. But you will agree with me, Kingsley, that things have changed since that time. The current drive of the central bank is to encourage, the development of a cashless economy, through which many people would conduct their payments transactions, through electronic means, and through the e-naira that is also being introduced now. And so the big people, or those who have large quantities of money to deposit, large quantities of money outside the banking system that they now want to deposit, we expect that they should be able to make transfers, between themselves and other, people, using the electronic channels, the e-naira and others. But I know that a good number of people at the lower level may not be able to do that. But it's also one way to encourage everybody to key into the cashless economy drive, and then open bank accounts because like you rightly said, those who have, large notes now to exchange can start putting them into the bank. So if they start from now, up to December 15, place large quantities of notes which they were holding outside and they were not really using them, then definitely that one will reduce pressure. And if at the end they are able to, key into the cashless system, transfer money, between themselves and merchants and others, electronically. So let me also assure them that, yes, like I said in my opening remarks, that definitely for a new policy like this, there might be some teething problems. I'm sure the bank, is preparing to address such teething problems. Well, I would just say that no time really, is actually suitable to say, so and so time you introduce a new policy. Professor Uche Waleke, hit the nail on the head at the opening remark that every policy option, has its costs and benefits. And then there are winners and losers. So, but if, like the central bank has rightly indicated, it's not that by December 15 is when everybody will start bringing lorry loads of cash to want to deposit, in the bank. They can start doing it from now, so that by that time it will be seamless, withdrawing some money. And we don't even expect anyway that people should withdraw all the cash they put there at that time and take them back to the informal economy or take them to their vaults or pillows. That is not the expectation. Otherwise, it will defeat one of the purposes, of the change in currency. But let me say that if the timing, the period, turns out to be relatively short, and a good number of people are not able to conduct the transactions, within that period, there is nothing like policy rigidity. You can always evaluate the policy implementation and then make necessary adjustments so that at the end of the day, everybody will seem to be happy with the implementation of the policy. So I would say, let's give the new policy, new Naira notes, a chance, as it were.
Right, giving the new Naira note a chance. Thank you, Professor Obadan. You talked about transitioning to cashless economy. The question I would want to ask, but we're due for a break now, is the fact that at the moment we have just about 134 million people who have bank accounts in the country. And then if just 134 million people have bank accounts, just imagine how many people have access to this online banking. So, I mean, at the end of the day, are we not going to be taking some people out of this scheme? Are we not going to be, making some people lose? Actually, those who should, I'm talking about the farmers, those in, like you said, those communities where they don't even know what's happening at the moment. Before they will get to here, it might be December 15. And then before they start making plans to go, deposit their money, the deadline is here. So, will this not actually, impoverish Nigerians? And then, of course, the issue of campaign, you talked about black money. All of that after this break. Let's just take a break. We'll come back on Good Morning Nigeria. All right, welcome back. This is Good Morning Nigeria, and of course, redesigning the Naira is bringing up so much issues this morning on the program, and we still have our guest with us. Right now, I'd like to begin with Paul Alaje, and my question to you will be on, one of the reasons given by the CBN that redesigning the Naira would help mop up, like you said, black money. And, check terrorism financing and campaign financing as we prepare for the elections. My question is it the duty of the CBN to check terrorism financing and campaign financing? There are other agencies who are supposed to do that and, be on the check. Why is the CBN going this way? And then the issue of counterfeiting. Are you saying that in 2020, the CBN printed some Naira notes? And let's also mention that the cost of that printing was about 58 billion Naira. over 58 billion naira for value worth 1.3 trillion naira. So are you saying that our naira is, it can be easily counterfeited? There's no full proof on it?
Well, I remember in 2017, I had a conversation on radio with the then spokesperson of the central bank in Abuja here, and we're looking at counterfeit money. The truth is that the percentage of counterfeit money in circulation is very low. It's not up to 20% or 30%. Yeah, there are economies, and not only Nigeria, where there are counterfeit money. But I think the real reason for this policy is not just because of counterfeit money. It's also not just because of fighting terrorism funding. It is because the central bank is looking at how its monetary policy will have impact. Now, there are other things that this policy will help achieve. That's why they are added together. Now, we also noticed that EFCC had said, this is a good policy. We are working with you on this. We want to monitor and ensure that anybody that wants to do money laundering by layering, by integration, will go after them. All those funding terror, we're also going to go after them. So when you look at all of those, they all sound good. But where is the challenge? This is where I say the challenge. If someone who have kept 50 million naira walk to a bureau de change and change all the monies to dollars, we have not been able to tell bureau de change that the law does not permit you to keep more than $10,000. Why are you keeping up to $1 million? So you see, again, monetary policy is important, but there are other structural issues. There are other parts of the economy that we must undo. First is, how disciplined are we as a people? You can wear a nice garment for a pig, but it's a pig anyways. It will go back to the mud and rub his body. So if we think that we are going to win in fighting terror, in fighting money laundering, it may not be that easy. If not, CFCC will have to be on all the streets where they're exchanging money. I don't know the number of staff they have. You could see what CFCC have done with the internet fraudsters that we call Yahoo Yahoo in Nigeria. I saw a lot of pictures EFCC sending on Twitter, making a lot of campaign. Rather than the number reducing, it's still increasing. Now, the same EFCC that has done that big job for the country to repair our image outside the country is now going to get involved in this with what number of staff, with what staff strength. And that is why, to curtail corruption rather than punishing people, for me, is to encourage transparency, to make corruption difficult in the first instance. If there are policies that say we want to check all BDC's offices and shops, once we have more than a certain amount of money that is against the law, we are going to punish. We are going to take drastic decision. And you don't need to take the entire population of bureau de change. All you need to do is to take a sample. So it is that time that this policy of central bank can make impact. In fact, if people are approaching bureau de change and there is no dollar, what will happen? The value of naira will improve again. The value of naira is reducing because many people are running to BDC and they always have dollar, and naira is becoming a challenge. Because each time you need dollar, we are always rushing there, collect dollar, keep. Collect dollar, keep. Even when you will not do anything with it, hoping that the faith in your local currency will destroy. Hoping that naira will go down, then you can go back the money you bought, we did nothing with it, take it to the bank and you've made money overnight. So do I think changing what's it called, redesigning naira will solve this? When e-money was introduced, there are a lot of things. E-money is 1 year now, and I was invited on a program, e-money like this, and I said, well, central bank can make any policy that they feel is good. This is to make electronic money available in naira form, even though we already have that. Almost all commercial banks already have a platform where you can transfer, receive money. But will this impacts the value of naira? Will 1 naira suddenly become $1 or 150 naira to $1? No. Rather than the value of naira improve, what has happened to it since 1 year ago? About 600 1 year ago, about 700 now. Even at official rate, about 412 to about 440, 450 now. So whether this is going to help to fight, central bank alone cannot do it. And it's not the core mandate. It is for anti-graft agencies which have promised, but because of structural issues, we might still find ourselves in the same position.
All right, Paul, Laje, thank you very much. Yusha Leo, let's also again return to the issue of the bank customer. I've had cause to mention this on the heels of the announcement by the central bank. It looks like in the past decade, I mean, bank customers have to make a journey to the bank for one business that is ordinarily could be handled seamlessly, and sometimes it will be long drawn. You recall, the clearest example would be Nuban.
Yeah.
If you in the past, your bank account number could be 13 with one bank, another bank it will be 14 digits, another account it will be 12 digits. They said now we were going to standardize it only 10 digits.
10 digits. Yeah.
And if you recall, it took sometimes several trips for you to go to the bank because the customer desk that will attend to you is poorly staffed and so overworked, overstretched. We are not finished with that one. The next thing was BVN. You know, in BVN, you will go, it hasn't registered. You will go and go. NIMC. Now we are going to be having another change of currency. I sometimes ask myself, every central bank governor that comes, must leave a legacy of something that I did with the system. Is this indicative of a crisis, with currency management, or I don't know. How do you look at it?
What is on ground is that there is a serious crisis in cash administration or currency administration, as you call it. The fact that each currency in different economies has different value, but by all standard, most of these currencies are fiat in the first instance before we come to customer. What is fiat currency is that anytime when the face value of money is not is strictly enough to define the currency, it's only dollar. Take for instance, you take a loan. Before we now come to customer, take an instance for a nation to borrow money from International Monetary Fund. We borrow dollar, and we have a scenario where we are exchanging it above 400 naira in our local currency, single United States dollar. And the same economy, when you step outside less than 100 feet, less than 100 meters, it is 740. That difference is also adding to the difficulty in managing the exchange rate and therefore managing the currency itself. So we don't know how much is going to be spent to change the entire. What I am expecting, before I come to customer, what I'm expecting the central bank to tell us the value of 200 naira to be printed and the cost. The value of 1,000 naira to be printed and the cost of that, so that we weigh in, because each currency that is printed, it has a velocity life where 1,000 naira printed probably is expected to have 4,000 unit of transaction. If you print lower denomination of 500, you are expecting to have 8,000 unit of transaction because of the classification and the arrangement. So now the customer service, all the banks, not only that, recently before CBN, we have seen what happens to Polaris Bank. And we also in a very serious economic situation where you now begin to have, thank God there is AMCON today. And therefore, investors' money, depositors' money is safe. But what is taking place today, which I want to use this, customer, people don't know. If you go to, I was at Access Bank here in Garki yesterday around 4. The entire banking hall is empty. Nobody is willing to come and deposit. Nobody, for one reason. Why? Because the central bank must take into cognizance the existence of POS stations nationwide. You find in a small street, you have more than 20 POS operating with our cash by the road. So these are some of the ways these currencies is going out of the bank, but banks took it as an advantage to employ very few staff just to maximize profit. And that is why at the end of accounting year, you realize they are just pronouncing figures as profit. And at the same time also, the government is not, the fiscal authorities are not enjoying the benefit of those transactions, because most of the banks are ready for overnight businesses to make millions.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Liu. Talking about the POS, of course, that is another matter for another day, because we know that, issues are beginning to come up with POS, and I'm sure that the farmer who struggles to get his 10 naira may not want to use the POS. But let's leave that. I'd like to go to Professor Obadan before we wrap up this discussion. Could you tell us in clear terms, I mean, to the layman watching you from one village at this moment, how, because you seem to be optimistic about the redesign of the naira, how would this affect the living standard of the average Nigerian? And don't you think, like some people, are saying, that this is just a way to empower a few people, the consultants, the contractors and all of that, because the administration is winding up? Will this affect the living standard of the average Nigerian? And don't you think this is a distraction we do not need at this time? Professor Obadan.
Thank you very much. Okay, you are still continuing. Yeah, thank you very much, Henry. I will be very brief, and to say that it will, the new notes per se, on their own, the fact that you have a new note may not, affect your standard of living or that of Nigerians generally. But it will affect the living standards of the Nigerian people indirectly through enabling the Central Bank of Nigeria to accomplish its mandate better. That is price stability, monetary stability. When large volumes of money outside the banking system now through the new banknotes find their way into the banking system, the potency of monetary policy instruments in helping to tackle inflation, will improve. In other words, the ability of the central bank to use monetary policy rate, cash reserve requirements, and other administrative measures for tightening, policy would become more effective, because the bank would have a handle on the growth of money supply, and invariably the instruments will become more effective if inflation is controlled in the process, along with other measures, of course. Then definitely the benefits of improved standard of living will accrue to the Nigerian people.
Professor Mike Obadan would like to thank you, and indeed thank our other guests. We know that this is a continuing conversation. What we've focused on today has been the policy announced by the central bank. We haven't yet heard from the National Assembly. Gentlemen, I'm sure that you know that in the past, where the central bank made some moves, including attempts at redenomination. That was a Soludo idea. Yeah. There was a public uproar. So how do you justify this? They say it would curb inflation XYZ until it was shut down. On that, Sanusi, we also remember that there was an attempt to even introduce a higher denomination above the 1,000. No, the Senate, of course, had a number of sittings and hearings on the subject matter, and they said, look, this is not going to work for us. That was the view from the parliament, and the parliament is also a significant voice on this issue. So it's a continuing conversation that we have the opportunity of returning to it. From Benin, we're joined by Professor Mike Obadan, Professor of Economics and member of the CBN Monetary Policy Committee. Always a delight having you on Good Morning Nigeria. Enjoy your weekend. Here in the studios, Professor Uche Waleke, Professor of Capital Markets, Nasarawa State University. Professor Waleke, thanks for being around.
Thank you.
Paul Alaje, an economic analyst, as well as Yusha Waleo, another economic analyst. Gentlemen, we appreciate you being with us today. So that's it for our conversation segment. All right, that's it for us on Good Morning Nigeria today. We appreciate you being with us. Enjoy your weekend. Join us again on Monday, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Look after yourselves. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And I am Ian Ray Dunn. Thank you so much for being a part of this edition. Have a great weekend. Yeah.